Facebook family, our Zoom family, we greet you this evening in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Thank you for sharing with us tonight on Let's Talk About It. Certainly we are grateful to have this opportunity and this platform to be able to come with you and share with you tonight. We have a special guest with us tonight that's going to talk with us about our legal rights. He's an ex-law enforcement officer. So before I bring him on, I just want to share a few things, share my heart, a few things tonight with you concerning why we are doing what we're doing. The scripture teaches us that my people perish because of lack of knowledge. And it's our desire that we learn as much as we can, not just about the scriptures, but even everyday life. So we have an opportunity tonight to be able to come and share with you some insight on your legal rights when it comes down to being stopped or whether someone is entering your home. So hang out with us tonight for a little while. We hope that what we share with you tonight will be a blessing to you and your family. So here we are. We're still in the midst of this global pandemic, and we are well over 100,000 lives that have been taken and by an enemy that we cannot see. And so while we're still trying to wrap our heads around COVID-19, we're also faced with another enemy that is deeply rooted in our society, which is called racism. And it's acted out every day in life. And so much of what we talk about tonight will have a part and will deal with racism as well, as far as law is concerned. So we understand that many things can happen, and I want to be transparent with you for a moment tonight that while I'm grateful to be on here tonight, I'm in a different space than I would normally be in, considering all of what we have faced and what we've actually seen on TV concerning George Floyd and him losing his life. I just need to be honest as a pastor tonight to let you know that I am angry. I'm hurt, and just to be frank, I'm pissed off because we can't even get over one before another one takes place. And this one hit home a lot. To see a grown man laying on the ground, crying out, it hit home a lot. Now, let me just say this. Not all police officers are bad. There's some good law enforcement officers that's out here. I have one in my family, my nephew, Marcus Jackson. He's an outstanding law officer. And I shout out to him tonight, and I thank him because each day he leaves his family. He goes out to protect us, and I want to thank him as well as all the others who put on the badge and the uniform every day to go out and protect our communities. We salute you tonight, and we say thank you for what you do. But on the other side of the coin, we do know there are others who put on the badge as well and put on the uniform. And there are some bad ones who do that and look like it seems like we just can't get over one situation before we see ourselves pushed into another one. And so Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed while jogging. You had Breonna Taylor killed while sleeping. And now here we are with George Floyd. And so this hits home, and it hits home because it seemed like it's more Black and brown people of color. And so I'm here tonight to share this platform with you. And I thank all of you who are watching. And I want to ask you to please share with your friends, please share with your family, because there's some valuable information will come out tonight that will be a blessing to us. And I must say, if we don't get finished tonight, we'll come back next week and we'll do part 2. So without further ado, I want to bring our guest on tonight, and I'm going to allow him to come on and introduce himself. But I want you to know, all of you that are watching, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I have 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, son-in-law, godsons, goddaughters, and I want you to know that their lives matter. I don't want you to think that we're just talking about just Black men lives matter, but our young ladies' lives matters as well. So understand tonight, and I'll be honest with you, I love my family, and I would never stand by and watch one of my families go through a situation without me as being a father, jumping in to help. And I know some of you may say that might sound crazy. It might be, but I'm a father, and any good father will do what he can to protect his family. And so I love my family. I want to put it out there tonight so everybody can hear it. I'll fight for my family, and if anything that's worth dying for, it is your family and your friends. So we're going to bring on our guest tonight. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself, and then we're going to jump right into this with some questions. And I would ask you tonight, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box or type it in, and we will have my daughter to read the questions to our guest tonight, and he will introduce himself in a minute, and you will get to know who he is, so we can get all of your questions answered tonight. So with no further ado, we're going to bring on our guest. Davian, welcome.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Davian McKnight. Bishop Jones invited me on to Let's Talk About It to address some of the disparities we see within the African-American community as it relates to dealing with law enforcement. Gravest concern right now is knowing your rights, what you legally can do within the realm when you're involved with law enforcement. I want to put my disclaimer out there. I am a former law enforcement officer. I am not a lawyer. The things that we're going to address this evening will differ based on your state and your city's municipalities. What I hope to accomplish here this evening is to create the dialogue and get people to start thinking how we should teach our children and those within our families how they should interact with law enforcement. You shouldn't be afraid. I'll go ahead and put that out there. There's not 100% bad officers. There's more good than bad. These are some of the things that we want to address this evening. So Bishop, I'll kick it back over to you, and we can get this thing started. Thank you.
Okay, all right. My first question to you, what advice would you give to all of those who are listening tonight if you had a son or a nephew, if they're pulled over by a police? What should they do and what should they not do?
Especially if they're
question, underage.
The first thing I would say is remain calm. So that's something we don't have that conversation. I spoke with my sister earlier today, and I told her I was ashamed because now that you and I discussed it, it's a conversation I never had with my nephews. So the first thing I personally believe, when you're stopped by a police officer, that encounter is going to go a few different ways. That officer pulls you over for whatever legal reason. That officer then approaches your vehicle. Hey, Davian McKnight, this is all arbitrary. Honolulu Police Department. The reason I pulled you over is A, B, and C. As the occupant of that vehicle, the things that you should provide that he's going to ask for next is your license, registration, proof of insurance. The biggest concern I see here. So first, let's unpack this a little further. When you're being pulled over, that's probably the most deadly encounter between a law enforcement officer and a motorist, because that officer doesn't know where you just came from, and you don't know what that officer's been through throughout the course of his day. So there's going to be an interaction between the two of you. But you have to listen to the commands that are being given. Hey, license, registration, proof of insurance. In a perfect world, I can reach in my glove box and I can retrieve those items all day, every day. The stark reality, with the sensitive environment that we live in, I now have to ask, okay, what do you want me to do next? Proof of insurance, license, registration. I need to articulate on my end, hey, it's in my glove box. So this is something we need to express to our children. To make things slightly easier, keep all those things together. Proof of insurance, license, registration, keep them in your sun visor. You get pulled over, they ask you for these things. Hey, I keep them in my sun visor. I'm going to reach them. I want to recover them now. Now, you know what you're doing and he knows what you're doing. You're putting him slightly at ease. Now, I know for some people, this may feel like overkill. When it's a matter of life and death, I feel like these precautions that we should take, right? So now we have to start thinking ourselves through the process. Now, again, in a perfect world, that officer should say, where do you keep your license and registration? Because I want to take out the illusion of not knowing what's going to happen next. Hey, I keep it in my glove box. Is there anything in your glove compartment that I need to know about? Yes, I have a firearm. We can kind of de-escalate from there. So now that puts us on a common ground of how we're going to conduct business. You tell me there's a gun in the car, hey, step out of the vehicle for me. And then we can conduct our business on the outside of the vehicle. I can call dispatch. They can tell me everything that I need to know. So to further unpack your original question, these are things that we need to be teaching the youth. If they've never encountered the cops before, they don't know what to do. So naturally stay calm. When that cop approaches that vehicle and you're shaking because you've never been pulled over and you see what's happening in the media, to him, those visual indicators may be something is not right here. And unfortunately for most people of color, we grow up a little faster than, our Caucasian counterparts or any other ethnic group. So at 16 or 17, some kids look like full-grown adults and their body stature fits that. So naturally, if that officer is smaller in size, that may be an intimidating factor to them. And now they're treating that child like an adult. So these are all things we have to think about. How do we de-escalate the situation before it takes off? So proof of insurance, license, registration, follow commands, and so what we can unpack from there, what usually happens, that officer then says, hey, he's making small talk. Where are you coming from this evening? Advice I give my nieces and nephews. Don't be disrespectful. Hey, I don't care to talk about my evening, because the stark reality of it is, if there's a shooting that just happened, 3 blocks away and you get pulled over and you're saying, oh, I'm coming from 6th and Main, now you've been implicated in something you don't know what has happened there. So now you're in a situation, that officer draws down on you, and then there now becomes a friction point between the two of you, because he believes you're involved in something that you had nothing to do with simply because you answered a question. So there's a lot of different rabbit holes that we can go down, scenario based, but the basic premises of what we should be teaching our youth: when you're stopped, comply, provide what they're asking for, but listen to what the commands are. Just because they say license, registration, proof of insurance, do not instantaneously reach for something. That's what's called a furtive movement. That's how people get shot, right? So would you like me to recover my license and the things that he asked you for? Because now he understands, I'm asking you because I don't want this to go sideways. Tell me what you want. And when you say this is the things you want from me, these are the things that I'm going to do. That puts us all on fair ground. And now there's no mystery to what I have in my car or what you're asking me to do.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a long-winded response.
That was good. That was good. But you understand, and most of our listeners will understand tonight, that based on what we see, and I understand the media blows a lot of things up, but some stuff is reality. It's hard for the Black and brown to be calm. Now, there was a time, probably when I was small growing up, you would see a law enforcement officer come, they were coming to help, but that was over 50-something years ago. And so times have changed a whole lot. And based on what we see that's happening to the Black and brown, we're gonna get nervous. I'm 56 years old. I get nervous when I see cops behind me, because I don't know what their intentions are. I'll pull over to the next lane just to get out of that way. But if I'm pulled over, my heartbeat gonna start racing because I don't know what his intentions are, and I'm gonna do everything possible to keep it small talk and answer all his questions. But the reality is, based on what we have seen, it's kind of hard to stay calm.
Yes, totally agree. So with that, again, these are things that we have to start thinking ourselves through. So I'm big on scenario based, where you provide these scenarios, and now you create an environment where people have to think about going through that process. Now, it's easier said than done. So again, if you already know, if you're going to be operating a motor vehicle, these are the requirements. Based on these requirements, okay, what do I need to do? So what you see with a lot of these situations is failure to comply. So an officer's asking you to do something, provide me your license. In some of these videos, you'll see people say, well, why do I have to give you my license? Those are the individuals who feel they know the law and you're not going to violate my constitutional rights. Now, you can look at this from two competing sentiments. Either, yes, you're going to comply, or no, I'm not going to do it. But by doing so or failing to do so, now that situation goes from zero, you know, to the next level. So it puts us in an environment where you went from compliant to non-compliant in a matter of seconds. So now what that officer is going to do, he's going to ask you to step out of the vehicle. If you don't want to step out of the vehicle, it's going to go in 3 steps. So I'm going to ask you, hey, sir, could you step out of the vehicle for me? Then I'm going to tell you, step out of the vehicle for me. And after telling you, then I'm going to make you. And that's where we're going to use force. Now, in the course of that happening, he doesn't know I'm 6'3", 220 pounds. But once that person goes to pull me to the ground and I'm somewhat resisting, or we get entangled, and now that person fears for their life and they pull their weapon on me and I end up getting shot, you know, all most people are going to see is the end of that video of me getting shot knowing I was unarmed. But there was something that led up to that. So we have to pick and choose the battles that we're willing to embark upon when these situations arise. If you're pulling me over for a minor traffic infraction, I'm going to let you conduct your business, give me my citation. I'll resolve the issue later in court. But, you know, looking at this thing, the systemic problem is, you know, racism within America is a war. And the stark reality, distinguishing the difference between the two, people are trying to fight battles on the side of the road. That's not the place for it. You know, so when I capture battle, meaning a small victory, war is prolonged over time. That's a duration of an effort. So don't try to fight the small battles. You know, these are all compounding effects that we can resolve later with the overarching picture.
Now, within the same question, if you have minors in the car along with an adult and they start questioning the minors, do they have to respond? Do they have to answer without the presence of their parents if they're riding with a friend?
And that's all situation based for the most part. I would say based on exigent circumstances, meaning, you know, there's a fleeing felon who's actually, let's say if a guy's a mass shooting, he shot 6 people. Hey, which way did he went? You know, logic would say, yeah, that guy's dangerous. He went over the fence. I'll answer your questions. For the most part, I would say no, not without the physical presence of your guardian. Because again, you may put yourself in a compromising situation that you answer a question that now implicates you in something that you may or may not had anything to do with, and you didn't have legal representation at that point in time. So I would encourage children, no, you should tell your children, comply, but just don't be answering questions for the sake of answering it.
Okay, I'm going to ask real quick, do we have any questions concerning, anyone have any questions concerning what we just finished dialoguing about before we move to the next question? I'm going to take that as a no. All right, second question. What are the ramifications if the police ask for consent to search your car and you say no?
That's an excellent question. I actually have this conversation quite often. So there's three medians in which someone could actually legally search your vehicle. So officer pulls you over, he goes through the whole gambit of what we just talked about. And, you know, he smells an aroma from your car based on his experience that he believes to be marijuana. He's then going to use that as legal grounds to search your vehicle. That's going to be one probable cause. You know, so based on him seeing or observing something that gives him the legal means to enter your vehicle. The second would be subject to arrest, meaning I'm being arrested and everything within my possession and in my car, now the law enforcement has to account for it. So if you have $10,000 in your glove box and when you're released or whatever the case may be, that money is no longer there. That arresting official is responsible for you and your property. So that's subject to arrest, meaning they have to inventory everything in your vehicle. And the last and final one is consent. Now, consent is very touchy, meaning you ask, hey, can I search your vehicle? I'm 9 times out of 10, well, 10 times out of 10 gonna tell you no. Bishop, you and I could be riding together. I can have known you for 30 years and you drop something, let's say you accidentally leave a firearm or a bag or something in my car. I don't know that that bag is there. However, when I give that consent and they find whatever that item is, whether it be contraband or firearm, I am now responsible for the item they find in my car. Now let's take this to a grander level. Let's say they find narcotics in the car. All right, so we already have somewhat of a mistrust based on our perception of dealing with law enforcement. So now they find drugs. I know I don't use drugs. So naturally I gravitate towards, they planted this in my car. that may create a altercation that leads to deadly force because I feel like I'm being set up at that point in time. That's why you never give consent, because you don't know where that road could lead. You think your car is clean, but the stark reality, no one knows what's in their car, because you have so many passengers in and out of your car. You're going to be held liable for something that you don't know is there.
So if you say no to searching my car, what if they said, well, we're going to do it anyway? What right do they have to proceed when you said no?
They don't. So that goes back to probable cause, meaning they can articulate why they're searching your vehicle or subject to arrest. If you say no, then constitutionally they are violating your rights. And they go through with it, but then that turns into fruit of the poisonous tree is what they call it in legal speak. So I searched your car and I find some contraband. Well, that evidence is now suppressed because the search was not lawful. That's what that really turns into. So understanding those dynamics, I'm just trying to put everyone in the mindset of never consent to search. And the typical person would say, hey, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have nothing to hide. But the stark reality of it is you don't know what's in your car until it surfaces and you don't even know what it is.
So at what point do they have a right to search your car? Let's say they stop you for a minor traffic violation, but at what point do they have an actual right? Do they have an actual right to search your car when you say no, or if they think they have a probable cause to search your car? Can you explain a little bit of that? So once you say no, does that mean no?
For the most part, yes. Now, if they can articulate the reason I'm stopping you, so the scenario I'll give you, okay, person's pulled over, I see beer cans on the floorboard of that car. I can make the assumption, hey, this person may be under the influence. They may be drinking and driving. Hey, sir, you mind stepping out of the vehicle for me? Once you get out of the vehicle, I smell the alcohol on your breath. I'm now going to give you a field sobriety test based on the probable cause that gave me the right to search your vehicle or your person, because I believe that you have been consuming alcohol. Now, two distinguishable different things, right? So I'll touch on the other one in a second. But that still doesn't necessarily give them the right to search your car. If you have a warrant to come search my house, let's call it, okay, I've been charged with stealing a flat screen television. They can look in my living room. They can look in any space that could accommodate a flat screen television. But the moment they go into my sock drawer and they find contraband, that evidence is now suppressed because they knew without reason that there was not a flat screen television in that drawer. And then, so the second part that I want to touch on was pat downs. So sometimes when you get out, you interact with law enforcement or they encounter you on the street, they do what we call a Terry frisk. So that law stemmed from Terry versus Ohio. What the Terry frisk is, you and I are conducting business in a closed space. I'm patting you down for my safety and for yours to ensure you aren't concealing a weapon that could incapacitate me or do me harm. So naturally, I'm going to pat your waistband, your pant leg, and your pockets. But the moment I say, hey, Bishop Jones, can you pull your pockets out for me? It goes from a pat down to a search, which is unconstitutional because I cannot articulate legally why I'm pulling your pockets out. Now, if I'm a former narcotics officer and I say, hey, when I patted his pockets, there was a substance of plastic. And based on my experience, I know that texture to be that of cocaine or heroin. That's when I articulated the search of looking now for drugs. So it really depends on the situation that you're in, and the circumstances will dictate it all. But in a vehicle, no, you just can't search my car if you decide to do so. And they'll try to use fear tactics. Oh, if you have nothing to hide, you'll let me search. Well, yeah, while you may think that is true, no, I'm not going to let you search my vehicle. I'm saying no 100% of the times, Bishop.
Okay, so at that point, by saying no, do they have a right to detain you, or by law, they have to let you go?
By law, if you're stopping me for a moving vehicle infraction, yes, you have to let me go. Now, to address the moving vehicle infraction, at least in the state of South Carolina, there's well over 1,000 moving vehicle citations. So when you see these cars pulled over on Interstate 95 and you have the narcotics interdiction there, sometimes profiling is happening. So you use these moving violations as a means to get into someone's vehicle. So I can articulate one of 1,000 or more reasons. One being an air freshener. In the South, we're big on that. We have air fresheners hanging in our mirror. That's obstruction to the driver's view. So I can pull you over and say, hey, legally, the reason I pulled you over is for this air freshener. I'm looking for something else to get in your vehicle. So the air freshener is the grounds to stop you. our interaction, now I'm looking for the reason to get in your car.
Okay. One question came in and said, how should you proceed if you have a concealed weapon in your vehicle?
That's definitely a great question. Now, what I would say, based on the requirements to get your concealed weapons permit, you have to do the background check, you have to qualify. It lets people understand that you respect weapons, you understand them. But 9 times out of 10, when you tell that officer, hey, I'm a CWP card holder and I am carrying a weapon, that somewhat puts him at ease, because now he knows you don't have any illegal firearms for the most part in your car. So you'll drastically see the tension levels de-escalate quickly because he looks at you as a law-abiding citizen, because that's based on perception. So I would say trends hold true, right? So culturally, if I'm a Caucasian officer and I don't interact with a lot of African-American people, my perception of African-Americans is going to be based on the things I do daily within my job. So if people fit this description, live in this particular neighborhood, and drive this type of car, I quickly develop a bias on people that drive that car based on my professional experience. So if I've experienced it 10 times, when I get to the 11th one, I'm expecting the exact same thing because most people believe trends hold true. So with that given, when I show him I'm a CWP holder, even though he's already seen I'm 11 out of 10, that changes his perception because everyone else that he's encountered has shown him one thing. I'm somewhat the anomaly now. But you should always, that's the first thing you should say. Hey, I'm a CWP holder. There's a weapon in my car. Because the last thing you want, and the reason why I say be upfront about this, license, registration, proof of insurance. You now go to open that glove box and there's a firearm there. When he sees that, and if he has a partner and the first thing he says is gun, now they're drawing down on you. You're not reaching for the gun, you're getting the thing that they asked you. But that's where I go back to the control element. Tell me what it is you want me to do. So all of these questions are great segues. Tell me what you want me to do. Where do you keep your license registration? It's in my glove compartment. However, that's where my firearm is. I'm a CWP holder. We have to do a better job at articulating these things as well for our safety, because we're leaving it up to them to discern whether I'm doing something right or wrong. So if we put all the cards on the table, hey, I'm a CWP holder, my weapon is in my glove box, along with my registration. Hey, step out of the vehicle for me. Now you and I can start a dialogue. From the moment I pull you over, I can run your license plate. I can do it at NCIC or I can call dispatch. Hey, I'm pulling over a 4-door sedan, one time occupied, meaning there's one person in the vehicle. And then I go to articulate that to dispatch. Dispatch then comes back and tells me who owns that vehicle, if there's any warrants or wants on that vehicle, if that vehicle has insurance. These are all things that the officer has before he even walks up to your car.
So he already knows if he walks up to your car, whether you have a permit to carry.
I don't think the two are explicit. So because you have what we would call is reciprocity. So let's say if I'm from South Carolina and I'm in Alabama, my CWP is registered in the state of South Carolina, but because of reciprocity laws, I can legally carry in that next state over,
right?
Depending on your law. So there's really not a way for them to see that. But once I tell them that, they can go from there. So what I will also say in relevance to search. So another segue question. Okay, CWP, they see my weapon. I've seen this happen on the job. They take your weapon and then they run it. They run the serial number to see if the weapon's stolen. That's a search also. You don't have legal grounds because the issue we're dealing with is not the firearm. It's the traffic infraction, the tail light. So these are all things that we don't readily understand. But when we see them happening now, we know exactly what's happening. And we know we should at least go to that department and say, hey, your officer did this on this date. Because I think at some point in time, your chief has to look into it and then internal affairs will look into it. And again, trends hold true. Once that officer has shown the persistent pattern of doing these particular things, that department now has to make a decision.
Okay. What if, another question that came in, does a pat down have to be done by same sex?
If you have a female officer available, 9 times out of 10, yes. Circumstances dictate. Some departments have very explicit policies. Me personally, if I can get a female on site, that's what I prefer. If I can't, I just need to articulate what I'm doing. And I'm telling you, I'm going to use the back of my hand, pat your pocket so you don't feel like I'm touching you inappropriately. Because sometimes it's cultural. Let's say if I'm pulling over a Muslim woman, and in their culture, a man has to be present. So these are all situation dictated. But for the most part, if you can get a female officer, then absolutely you should call for one.
Okay. All right. So next question. is, if I'm in the back of your squad car because you have detained me, and while you're taking me en route to the police department, and the officer start asking me questions, do I have to respond?
Absolutely not. You can plead the fifth. You are not obligated. You've already been detained, or you're going to jail, right? So the worst has already happened. The best thing is we didn't get into a physical altercation. I can bond out. I'll get out of jail, but I'm not going to answer any more of your questions because I may be putting myself in a more incriminating situation. So at this point, you've already determined that I broke the law. You're arresting me. There's nothing else to talk about. If you're making small talk and you decide you want to talk to the officer, but legally you're not obligated. You just you already arrested me. You've already done the worst to me. So I'm going to go, I'll call my lawyer after the fact, but I will always tell people 10 times out of 10, use your discretion, but don't just willingly give information just for the sake of giving it, because it may put you in a situation again that you know nothing about.
So every city, every city is different. So they have different laws. So what would you say to the person that's listening tonight that's not sure all of the laws in their state? What should they do about trying to learn those laws? Is there a certain class you can take, or how should you go about trying to make sure that you understand all the laws when you're stopped, or whether or not being stopped, or whether you're in a grocery store, what your rights are?
For the most part, I would say seek legal counsel. That would be a very vague one. The stark reality of it is we're not going to know all the laws, but we at least need to know our rights, and when you're committing a crime, or if you're doing nothing at all, we need to be able to understand and identify when someone's violating our constitutional rights. Often, I think we come from a position of misunderstanding. You'll have officers stop you, hey, let me see your ID, and then we get confrontational. But we have to ask ourselves again, is that small victory worth the enduring war? So for me to win that small victory, is this something I want to pursue now? I know I haven't done anything wrong. He wants to see my ID. Maybe it's a mistaken identification. Hey, you look like this person. Here's my ID. That's all going to be discretionary. But what I would say is, reach out to some of your local reps at the departments. These guys are a wealth of knowledge, but again, they aren't lawyers either. And a lot of the things we're doing out there in the streets is left open to our interpretation of what law we think you're in, the infraction that has been made. Sometimes you'll get pulled over. They pulled you for not maintaining a lane, and everything else they're finding along the way. Oh yeah, this person has a warrant, doesn't have insurance, and that's when that discretion comes into fact from the officer. But there's a ton of resources out there. You can't Google everything because it's going to be dictated by where you live in your city ordinances.
Okay. All right. So another question is coming in. While that question, okay, here's the question. If you are in custody on your way to be processed, are the officers responsible for your nutritional needs if you say you're hungry?
That's an interesting one. I have not seen that one specifically. I think this may be tied to Dylan Roof and the Charleston 9. Yeah, that one I'm not sure of. I came from the City of Charleston Police Department, so I still have friends that are in North Charleston and Charleston proper. That's actually a question I'll ask those guys and get you a solidified answer for people that responded to it. But yeah, I definitely can't answer that one because everyone that we arrested, 20 minutes later, you're in county.
I actually read an article today where a white Caucasian had been in a shootout, had killed, I think, one or two people. He was injured, and he was sitting down beside the car, and the officer was giving him a drink of water.
That's interesting in and of itself, and what I explained to my sister, as I alluded to earlier, so based on the cultural experience, if you've never encountered a black guy or black gal or a person of color, you don't have that defining balance that allows you to relate to that person, because culturally you don't understand me, I probably don't understand you. But I think when they see someone who looks like them, I think they gravitate towards it. Whether they're good guys or bad guys, it's like, okay, I can see some of myself in that person, despite the person just, shot 6 people. So for them, I think it's more of a precaution thing. Like, hey, I don't want this guy to say we treated him unfairly, so it's best that I give him water. But they're not looking at the optics of, hey, that was broadcasted all over the media, and now it seems like this guy's getting, preferential treatment. So sometimes it's more of the act itself, people trying to ensure they don't put themselves in a conundrum, if you will, versus, hey, you know, you did a great job committing that crime out there. I don't think that's the case.
Okay, so we've seen a lot of stuff on TV. So what happens when you are detained? Do you get a phone call?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to call someone, whether it's you're going to be trying to secure your bond, or you're calling a lawyer. You know, so now they may say, hey, court's not open until Monday, but legally they have to afford you that opportunity to contact someone. It's just like, you know, if I get arrested today, I need to contact someone so you don't think I'm missing. You know, that's just the process.
Now, being in an era where all of our numbers are locked in our phones, not too many
Mhm.
people remember phone numbers like they used to. There was a time that we could just spit out our friends' phone numbers, but now that we can't. So if all of our numbers are locked in our phone and they have detained our phone, what should we do?
I think that may be remain to be unseen. That's something that we definitely have to articulate. Hey, I'd like to make a phone call, but that's somewhat of a double-edged sword, because now you're giving them access to unlock your phone, and whatever you're concealing that may be incriminating or not incriminating, you've just gave them access to your phone. I think most officers would be hesitant because legally, yes, they're doing you a solid, but on that same token, I don't want someone looking through my phone. You don't even let your kids go through your phone because it's personalized to you. So I think it may be you talking to the supervisor. The typical officer would say, hey, let me ask my supervisor, because the last thing you want is to be put in a dilemma where, you know, you're being accused of something. So you ask on-site supervisor, hey, you know, I need to make a call. I don't have that number readily available. Would you guys be able to give me access to my phone? And they may say no, because they don't know what you're going to do with that call at that point in time. You know, you could be sending an urgent text to someone saying, hey, X that don't commit the crime or whatever that you were going to do. So looking at it from the law enforcement standpoint, they also have to be mindful. If they give you access to that phone and then you commit a crime in conjunction with them giving you access, you know, they gave you the ability and the jeopardy to do so. So that's definitely a conundrum.
Okay, the next question we have: when an officer pulls you over and continues to avoid the question of why you were pulled over, but continues to voice instructions, at what point do you question this situation?
And that goes back to your personal discretion. You know, if you're being pulled over for a taillight, in a perfect world, you know, that officer should articulate why they pulled you over. In an imperfect world, which we're living in, Officer, you know, McKnight, Honolulu Police Department, do you know why I stopped you today? That's always how this conversation goes. So I'm not going to self-incriminate and say, oh, you stopped me because of A, B, and C, or I probably was speeding. He probably stopped me for speeding. That officer then needs to articulate why he lawfully has temporarily detained you. You know, so now he's telling you, I stopped you because of A. You know, okay, no more mystery there. You stopped me for speeding. Let's address that problem. Now, when you start giving me other commands, license registrations, where I'm occupying a motor vehicle, I'm operating on public roads, these are things that are required by me as a citizen and a occupant of that vehicle. So these are things that I'm required to supply to you. What I will say is follow the commands, you know, so in the order, it goes compliant, non-compliant, and then you have totally compliant, meaning you're cooperating 100%. Compliant, you're listening to commands. Non-compliant, things start to de-escalate. So if I'm telling you step out of the vehicle and you're saying I'm not going to step out of the vehicle, that then escalates the situation. So again, that alludes back to my original statement. Ask the person, tell the person, now you're making the person do it. And that's going to be by force. Now, the amount of force that is used depends on you as the individual. You know, if you can get out of the vehicle free of your own will, I think you should. Now, if you're on the side of the road and it's more of a safety concern, officer, can we stand on the back of the car because I don't want to be hit by a car? You know, because that's also a hazard for you and that officer standing on the side of the road, because you may be hit by an oncoming car. You know, so there's lots of concerns to be worried about. You know, if you're getting pulled over and you see a gas station right up the road, you know, that's not, you know, far and you're going to be deemed as a fleeing the scene, you know, drive further up the road. Go to a lit area so someone else can see what's happening. I'm not saying someone's going to do something to you, but now you're providing the opportunity for other people to witness what is occurring between you and that officer. And it may not be nothing. 9 times out of 10, I believe it will be nothing, but there is that small inkling where, you know, you can end in a situation where, you know, someone ends up getting killed because of excessive force.
So Do we have a right to ask the question, is the officer, if he's wearing a body cam, whether or not it's turned on?
Yeah, you can ask that, because if he's wearing it legally, it should be on. Same as his dash cam. Is this being recorded anywhere? I can't record you. It's just like anything else without telling you. It's almost like you're consenting, and that body cam is there for your protection and for mine. But some of these laws that are coming out, like now in Charlotte, where they're saying, hey, we don't want to release this footage to the general public, because they know that's going to be more of a liability for them, and someone's going to be able to pick apart everything that went wrong. Now, with the media, what we're seeing is what I call armchair quarterbacking, where I can look at an officer's actions and I can say, hey, he should have did this. He did this wrong. It's easy for me to say that because I'm not in that situation. But when you're in that situation, things escalate so quickly, and you go into SNS, where you go into fight or flight mode. Everyone's fighting for survival. So I will say this: your job as an officer is to preserve life, respond to calls, and protect property. Everything else is a secondary. So when I encounter you on the side of the road, I'm there for a traffic infraction, whatever the case may be. I don't think people get out of their car with the explicit intent of doing you harm. But I do think the mindset is there. If harm has to be done, a lot of people are willing to exert the amount of force necessary to control that situation. So when we look at the human element, when I leave and I put on my uniform, I have every intention of coming home at the end of the day. You as the motorist, you don't have any intention of encountering law enforcement. So when we're all cognizant of the probability of how things could go, we need to think about how we want to deal with these situations. It's unfortunate, but as people of color, we don't necessarily have the luxury, to sit here and have semantics. This isn't legal. This is legal. Comply. If the officer's wrong, we can deal with that injustice another time. But right now, let's deal with the taillight issue. Let's not debate on the side of the road about who's right and wrong, because one person has a gun, the other person doesn't. And if I don't make it through the situation and there's not a body cam, there's only one side of the story.
So
there's no one who can validate for me.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So you said preserve life.
Yes.
Have you seen the video of George Floyd?
I have, yes.
And based on what you've seen, with the officer having the knee in his neck, is that preserving life?
Absolutely not. So my thoughts are, for anyone that, is into defensive tactics, grappling, things of that nature, based on the last still image I saw, that guy's hands were in his pocket. So that means if your hands are in your pocket, you have the full force of your body on that person. If I was trying to pin you down, if you have any siblings and you fought as kids and you don't want that person hitting you or kicking you, you hold that person down, but you're leaning your body weight more towards a position to where they can't move. But if you're telling me 4 officers couldn't restrain this man, I find that hard to believe, unless, he's hopped up on some type of drug. But even then, to have your knee on his neck, if you were trying to restrain him, some of your body weight would have been distributed on the ground, and that would have gave you more balance to keep him forcefully down. So when you look at that video, there's a lot of things that still remain to be seen, and the way we experience law enforcement is going to be way different. So the backstory I got to that, and more things are coming out now, is supposedly he was involved in forgery of some sort. At least that's what the person who called the cops was expressing. And to start reality, whether it's forgery or not, no one deserves to lose their life. That alludes to Central Park, lady walking her dog. I'm going to call the cops on you. What she either realizes or failed to realize, when you do that to a person of color, that could definitely be a death sentence, because now you're calling guys who may already be at a heightened state, depending on what they're dealing with, and they're going to deal with someone that they think is being hostile or aggressive. We don't know how that situation is going to materialize, and that could very well cause us our lives.
And see, we as Black and brown people, we've been dealing with this for over 400 years. So it's gotten to a boiling point. And what we see on TV in Minneapolis now, I don't condone the looting at all, the going into the stores and tearing the stores apart and setting stores on fire. I don't condone at all. I think it's wrong. I think you lose focus on the real issue when you get to that point. But we have seen so much, and we've had to endure so much as Black and brown people dealing with watching the white privilege. You mean to tell me I'm out here bird watching and I ask you to put a leash on your dog? Now you're going to make a phone call and you're going to hype it up, and everybody can see that you're hyping it up, and you say, and this is a black man, so you can understand why that we're on edge the way that we are. And
Yes.
it's sort of hard to speak to a younger generation when they see this every single day, whether it's where they live or wherever it might be. And it's kind of hard to try and pull them aside. And all the while we want to do that and let them know there's a different way to go about doing it. But I can understand, as someone, you can only take but so much as a human being.
Yes.
And after a while, you're going to explode. And as a pastor, I feel that I got pretty much good restraint. But when I keep seeing incident after incident after incident, after a while, man, I'm telling you, my lid blows off. It blows off because this just keep happening. We haven't even gotten through Ahmaud Arbery. We haven't gotten through Breonna Taylor's situation, and here we are faced with it again. So it's just over and over and over again. And after a while, you say, you know what? What's the point? They're going to arrest them. They may arrest them, but there very seldom is their conviction. So as a law enforcement officer, former, what does it take by law, if you can tell us, what does it take to not just arrest that officer and bring an indictment, but what does it take to get a conviction?
That's a good question, Bishop. So I'll start by saying it's definitely an uphill battle. If you look at all of the elements that have to occur in order for first an arrest to be made. Secondly, we have to pray for a prosecution. So if you look at Ahmaud Arbery's circumstances, it took weeks for them to make an arrest.
7 days.
That was only at the video surface. After that video surface, it took, armed men to stand in those neighborhoods and, public outcry for this to happen. So it's definitely a uphill battle. So this plays into a much bigger picture. We all harp on what the commander-in-chief does. We agree with it, we disagree. We look at the discontent it creates amongst society when, the person leading the country speaks a certain manner. But we also have to take note of our publicly elected officials, the people that we have running our communities, our governors, our mayors, our representation. That's where the change starts. That's what we have to be mindful of. So going through the process, I don't know that there is a end-all be-all solution to getting someone prosecuted. So we saw that, I think his name was Officer Slayer, that shot Walter Scott in Charleston, South Carolina. He was fleeing. But when you think about the circumstances, you pull him over, he has a warrant for child support. I have 2 occupants, he runs. I have the person in the vehicle with him. I have his car. I have his driver's license. Common sense would say, well, why am I going to chase this guy when I could just have a warrant for his arrest and I have his buddy with me? I can go to that guy's house and pick him up. But instead, I pursue him on foot, and then I'm caught shooting this guy in the back. Now, when the circumstances are undeniable, there's nothing you can do about it. That person will have to face their day. As Christian people, maybe we're thinking, that person will pay the price judgment day, but we want justice now for the things that are occurring. So we really have to start being cognizant of the people that we're electing. And I think the way to do so is when you take monetary gain away in circumstances. So I'll allude to Charlotte, North Carolina, when they had the Black Lives Matter and everyone was protesting. They were, blocking the roads. People couldn't make it to work, things of that nature. I said, but I guarantee you, if you were at that time, if you were to block a Carolina Panthers game and those billionaires can no longer make money and you're hurting their bottom line, that matters to politicians. That matters to the governor. And then you start to see a change. That narrative is now changing. I think when we commit collectively and we start thinking about economically where we're spending our money, that'll be the change that you're looking to see, because we actually have a seat at the table. Whether that be through the power of the black dollar, we got to think about what it's going to take. We can protest all day, we can talk about injustices, but the things that we have to really consider is economically, we can suppress a lot of industries if we stop spending our money there. And those community leaders are going to say, hey, we're going to have to do something about this problem. because that money that we had coming in from the Black community, that no longer exists. That's dried up. You know, so sorry to make the response long-winded, but I think it's an uphill battle.
No,
But
that was
these are all
needed.
steps to do it.
We needed to hear that. And for all of those who are watching tonight, I want to say to you, make sure you're registered to vote. We got to do this at the ballot box. A lot of these district attorneys, these are elected officials. And like McKnight said, we have to start at the bottom and work our way up. So when we decide and we feel that election time is only important when we're electing a president, we're making a grave mistake. We have to start from the bottom up. So please, everyone that's listening tonight, please make sure you are registered to vote, especially coming November. We need to vote, vote, vote. So we have a couple of more questions that have come in. I'm going to let my daughter ask those questions right now.
Perfect.
Regards to the George Floyd situation, how would a bystander in that situation, such as a first responder who wishes to intervene, how could that person do so safely without being a threat to the police?
That is a great question. So officers are handling the situation. So when you say first responder, I'm assuming firefighter, EMS, or a fellow officer. If you're in uniform, I think you may be safe to approach. If you're not in uniform, I think you need to identify yourself, say, hey, you know, I'm Officer McKnight. I'm here to help. Hey, can you take your knee off his neck? Because some of the problems that we're seeing is we're capturing it. We're doing a great job at that, but we're also capturing the murder of someone who looks just like us. Now, I would say it probably would be suicidal to also be a part of the problem, because now we may have two victims from one situation. So now we have to pick and choose what it is we want to do and how we want to be a part of that. But as a first responder, I think if you identify yourself properly, or if you're in uniform, those officers will gladly let you assist them. I hope I answered your question.
I think so. Next question.
Thank you. Next question. I'm a female that travels by myself the majority of the time now. My question is, if I'm pulled over and let's say it's at night and I feel very unsafe, am I allowed to drive to a lit area, or do I have to pull over immediately?
I think that is going to be based on circumstances. You know, if you could see the nearest gas station, I would tell you continue to drive down the road. If you don't feel safe, the last thing we want is the officer to think you're trying to flee. So maybe if you're going to do this, don't do it at a high rate. You know, maybe you put on your hazard lights, because that's an indicator to me that, okay, I could see that you see me seeing you. And now I probably understand, okay, she's driving someplace lit because she wants to be seen. So now you're sending a visual indicator to that officer. This isn't doctrine. This is just us thinking outside of the box to let you know, hey, I'm complying. I just don't want to pull over right here. So I think that's a means for you to say, hey, I'm going to do what you want. I'm going to comply. I just want to pull over further down the road. But don't accelerate your speed, maintain that speed, because the last thing you want is that officer to perceive you as a fleeing felon. And when he gets out of the car, he's doing the exact thing you don't want him to do, is drawing down on you and forcefully removing you from the vehicle.
At what point can you ask an officer to bring his supervisor on the scene?
Oh, immediately. Hey, I want to speak to a supervisor. And he will get on the horn and call his sergeant.
And you don't have to say anything else until that supervisor arrive on the scene.
Nope, you don't. You know, and in some situations where someone feels like they've been slighted, or, you know, you've done an injustice to them, they'll ask for your card. Officer give you his name. It's going to have his last name, his badge number. And that's when you go to the department, and, you know, that guy's lieutenant, his captain, sometimes the chief. This is when all these other people get involved. But that sergeant, he's on shift exclusively for things like this. You know, when you have a situation arise, and he's the person trying to mitigate and understand both sides. You know, so he's going to come there for your reassurance. You two are going to have that conversation, and he's going to tell you, okay, my officer was within the law of doing, you know, this particular thing, or, hey, you know, we apologize. It was a misunderstanding. And then that officer is probably going to be reprimanded.
Okay. So, okay, there's another question coming in. So let me, what's the next question? Is there another question?
Okay, the next question. If you have someone on the phone or Facebook Live for safety, when pulled over, do you have to reveal this to the officer?
Not to my knowledge. Facebook and going live wasn't a thing during my time in law enforcement, but something to be mindful of, especially if it's dark. Yes, I can see the illumination from your mobile device, but I don't want to put myself in a compromising situation where it's perceived as a weapon. So that's something to think about also. If you have a cell phone holder that you use for your GPS and you put it on live, hey, I'm recording you for my safety and for yours. Same thing they do with their body cams. I don't know the legal answer to that, but I would also say be mindful. Cops approaching your car and you have a foreign object in your hand that should be visible as a phone. But if it's nighttime, you run the dilemma of that guy misidentifying what it is you have in your hand, and that could go sideways very quickly.
Okay, thank you. What does the law say about me as an individual having an onboard camera system in my vehicle?
Yeah, I definitely can't answer that one. But I would say a useful resource, you can look at your DOT regulations, or if you ever encounter a state trooper, they'll definitely be able to tell you the laws on the very specifics.
Okay, if you are a bystander, and you're not involved in the incident, but you're recording, and the officer tell you to put up your phone, and you say no, does he have a right to take your phone?
Absolutely not. You're on a public property. You're on public property, or even private property. There's nothing on that street that you can't record. They may tell you to back up. Okay, you back up, but you can continue to record. I've seen several videos where it goes sideways quickly because that officer may say, "Get that phone out of my face." Okay, just back up, comply, but you don't have to stop recording. Legally, there's nothing they can do about that. But there's a misconception where there's an intimidation factor where someone may think they're wrong, and now someone's capturing it, and they're going to have to answer for their transgressions. So that's where that intimidation factor comes in. Hey, stop recording me. Put your phone away. Okay. And a lot of this doesn't require back and forth, and that's what people try to get you into, that dialogue where you're baited into, hey, put your phone away, or I'm going to do this to you, and you're like, oh well, I'm within my right. Don't even say anything. Just back up. Hey, you need to stand on the other side of that line. Comply. Continue to record. Their response to you do not have to say anything back in response. All you're doing is recording. Whatever's revealed in that footage will speak for itself.
Okay. So let me give you a scenario. What happens in a domestic violence situation where an officer is called to a home and there's been some violence that have taken place? Female has been beaten up. What happens as far as the law is concerned?
That's a great question. So outside of a vehicle stop, on the side of the road, criminal domestic violence, CDV, that is probably, if not the first, the second most dangerous situation you can be involved in, because you're going into a residence where you're not sure what has occurred, why they're fighting, if there's children involved, if there's alcohol involved, and if there's firearms on the premises. So when you show up, usually it's a 2-officer response, and in those situations, you definitely want to pat everyone down. There's a video surfacing right now that shows a criminal domestic violence incident. Officers talking to the guy pulls out a gun, shoots him right in the side of the head because he was that close in proximity. So it's definitely a dangerous situation where, a person's temper is at its highest at that point. So the first thing you do lawfully, you have to identify the primary aggressor. Primary aggressor meaning who is the person that not necessarily started it, but that the physical aspect of it. So naturally, you're probably going to remove the guy from the home. People always gravitate that way. But if I'm the person with the lacerations to my face and I can see him on her hands, I can identify that she is the primary aggressor. And from there, we're going to try to restrain her and remove her from the home. However, that could go sideways very quickly because you may have an altercation. Someone calls the cops show up, and then that person quickly realizes, I can't bond you out. You're the primary provider for our household. And then you're getting into an altercation with the two of them. And I've had that happen to me personally. So that's something that has to be thought through as far as the process, because you definitely want to separate those two individuals, because the last thing you want is them versus you, because that could end badly quickly. So yeah, basically you're just identifying whoever the primary aggressor is and assessing the situation from there.
Okay. Got another question?
Is recording covered under the First Amendment?
Right of free speech. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely can't answer that one for you. Again, most of these guys that you're going to encounter on the streets, they're probably going to be 21, 22 years old. You know, they fresh out of the academy, 3 months. They don't know the legal speak and the laws as well as a lawyer would. You know, so for the most part, you're kind of winging it. And as you become more seasoned, you get more exposure. You know, you're going to have all these situations manifest and materialize in the course of doing your job. But I think you are legally, personally, this is my opinion, I think you legally can record, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Okay, so we're getting close to the time where we need to stop. So I'm going to ask you a question for all of those who are listening. And if we have more questions that come up after we have stopped this interview, then we'll bring it back next week. What would you say as an ex-law enforcement officer, considering the atmosphere that we are living in today with everything that happened in the last, let's say the last month, what would you say to the Black and brown community? Being a Black man yourself, what would you say?
That's an interesting one, Bishop. What I would say to everyone is, you know, keep a positive mindset. You know, I know it's hard to stay positive in times like this, you know, because I know just as well as anyone else, I could be out for a run. I love running. And I can encounter someone who doesn't think I fit the bill of what they believe should be in their neighborhoods. That's my daily reality of what I have to deal with. I would say keep an open mindset. Always be prepared to defend yourself. I'm a huge advocate of being able to protect yourself also. You know, so a armed society is a polite society. I know there is a stigma within the African-American community of gun ownership, especially for females. So what I would start encouraging everyone, and something everyone should start thinking about in light of a pandemic, you know, where resources are scarce and things you can't protect from other people if you are the sheep versus the sheepdog. So what I would say is, you know, protect yourself at all costs. You know, think about the situations and the dilemmas that you're in and ask yourself, when you find yourself in a peculiar situation, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, this goes back to my original statement, battles versus wars. Are you more concerned with the small skirmish that could be fought later? Because the battle is a collective as a people, you know, as Black and brown people, as a people. This is a war that we're looking at when it comes to racism, whether it be in the form of discrimination, police injustice, the list goes on. We have to start thinking collectively, is what I'm doing today going to improve the life of someone else tomorrow? You know, so that's the distinguishing difference between battles and wars. We're fighting a war. You know, in wars, there's winners and losers, but this is slightly different than that, you know, and wars are enduring. So I'd say, you know, keep an open mindset, continue to pray, continue to spread positivity, you know, and continue to be the best version of you, and just work on yourself, you know, and God be with everyone. So I have.
All right, I think we have one last question, and then we're gonna stop. Do you have that last question, Tiara? Okay, all right.
Yes, I do. Sorry about that. Is there something such as riding the left-hand lane?
If they're referring to the shoulder of the lane, no, as long as you're maintaining your physical presence in the lane and you're not swerving from one lane to another, then no, that's something I've never heard of. That's not a citation that I would write for someone. Now, think about this from the perspective of the officer. I may think you're drinking and driving. Oh, that person's, you know, veering far left all the time. So I use that to articulate, hey, I'm stopping you because of this infraction. And now what I'm looking for is that indicator that you may be intoxicated. You know, so when I look at your nystagmus, you know, gazing horizontal nystagmus, that's pretty much when your eyes can't maintain focus because you're under the influence of alcohol. Once I see these indicators, I now pull you out and we do a field sobriety test, because my initial suspicion of why I'm stopping you based on those gamut of vehicle laws proved to be right, you know, so that's just something that you pick up over the course of time. You know, so again, when you ask these legal questions, hey, you know, did they legally pull me over? Fight it in court. Definitely don't argue about it on the side of the road, because again, there's something bigger at stake later down the line that it's for a collective versus an individual battle. So yeah, we're going to continue to be stopped. We should try to continue to be safe, and just think about what it is you're doing. And I will close with, you already know the requirements to be on the road: license, registration, proof of insurance. Keep those things together. Keep them in your sun visor. Don't have to look for things in multiple places. Make that traffic stop as seamless as possible. We'll deal with the issues later. But this is how we all stay safe.
All right. Thank you so much, Davian, for coming on and being our guest tonight. And I want to say to all of our viewers tonight, each Thursday we have Let's Talk About It, Facebook Live and Zoom. If there's something, a particular subject that you would like to hear, you will see our information typed in the box. Please send us an email and we will try to get those subjects on and the proper people to be able to talk about those subjects. So please let us know if there's something that you would like for us to talk about on Let's Talk About It on each Thursday night. We'll be more than happy to try to work on that. So thank you again for tuning in. Thank you, Davian, for coming and helping us tonight. I think it was a splendid job. This recording also will be on our YouTube channel, and you can find that on @New Life CBC for those of you who might want to share it with someone else, especially our young generation that's coming up. We definitely want them to listen to it. I think there was some valuable information that was given to us tonight. So let's use it so we can either save our own lives or save somebody else's life. And with that, we say God bless you, and we'll see you on next week. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Bishop.
Thank you.